think he officially grew up that year. That was version 2. Version 2 lasted for 1 year. Version 3 was the rest of the run in Miami. He was a different man that second year through the last year in Miami. He just was. He
well, let me just, I would agree with that because I always think back to that, final series. And a lot of people, first of all, I don't think Dallas as a team gets enough credit for what they did. I think it was,
I'm glad you brought that up because we're about to talk about that.
I think a lot of people like to believe that all of a sudden this was like, Miami falling apart. No, Miami didn't fall apart. Miami just got outplayed.
Yes.
Dirk Nowitzki was on a whole nother level. And I think that there was some motivation from previous slights where it came to the final series 5 years before. There was also the whole the cough gate, if you will, between Wade and James, and then Nowitzki. It was a properly built team at the right time, and I think Miami was still just getting things together. They had enough talent to push through, but I think Dallas really was the better team.
Yeah, I do. I absolutely do too. Which would see for me to wrap up that point is to be that version 3 was the rest of Miami. Version 4 was that. I'm sorry. The point version was the return to Cleveland. He was a different player then. He was a different guy. I think he really, for the second time, took his power of the entire league into his hands at that point. But I think he did it more intentionally than ever when he went back to Cleveland. That was like one of the strongest flexes I've ever seen. And then with that final version being the current one we're seeing right now in LA, and that chapter is still writing itself. But I want to talk about LA, the Lakers, and LeBron and what that all means, because it's a lot more than LeBron. LeBron is the conversation is here, but there's just been something I've been thinking about with this whole thing. I think it's lost in the mix a little bit. Anthony Davis. Now, it's legitimate debate. I think that the conversation of who is the most impactful and who is the best player on the Lakers are two different things. I think that at this point in his career, Anthony Davis is the most skilled player. But LeBron is still the most impactful. Him being there, if he was not there, the Lakers would not be here. However, if Anthony Davis was not there, the Lakers would not be here. So it's.
I think that if you take one of them out of the equation, then the Lakers are a lower seed team. Playoff team, absolutely, but a lower seed team. I think this was LeBron realizing that, this is the best big man he's ever played with. And let's keep in mind, I still think in some ways Chris Bosh is sort of undersold. I think Bosh is a tremendous player.
Let me jump on that real quick. Is this the best player that LeBron has ever played with?
That's a really great question. I don't know. If you ask me today, I'll say no. If you ask me tomorrow, I'll say yes. I say no in that, and AD has done a remarkable job so far, but this is still his first significant postseason run. And this is also still his first run with a player of a similar caliber. And I think there is a mentality that also has to be embraced with that too. The reason why I would say Chris Bosh is the best big man he's played with. Wade may have been the best player, although I also have I think Wade also benefited from having great players around him. As great of a player as he was, I still think people forget that Wade wouldn't have won without Shaq or LeBron or Bosh, or he wouldn't have won a championship at all.
Sure.
But I think that with Bosh, who obviously wouldn't have done a lot of things without his own teammates, Bosh also had this sort of mentality of, I knew what it was like to carry a team and to not go as far, but I knew when I came somewhere what my role was supposed to be, and how I could fit this in a scheme of a really good defensive team. Eric Spoelstra is one of the best coaches of this generation, and we're starting to see that now. Wade was a generational talent at shooting guard. Again, this team has a really good system. And Pat Riley, listen, I'm a Knicks fan. I'm not supposed to say these words. Pat Riley is a freaking genius, always has been. I'm never going to – I could say bad things about Pat Riley, but I recognize the gangster right away. Bosh came into the system saying, like, all right, I know whose show this is going to be. If y'all let me do my job,
Bosh was the right type of superstar to put together in that situation. Here's the thing that gets lost up and think about that Heat team. And I swear I didn't mean to stay with those Heat this long, but it's got much to do with the series that we're about to face. Is that Bosh was, when you hear people talk about big threes and people talk about putting together these things, and I think that we're moving out of the big three era some, especially with what we've seen the returns be here in this NBA season. But when you put together a big three, if you're going to have three separate superstars in it, you have to have one superstar in it who's willing to step down. That's why a lot of these teams haven't worked. Bosh could have stayed anywhere and got top flight numbers. He kept making all-star teams. But to your point, he was a superstar who was okay with playing not just second fiddle, but third fiddle, and very clearly fit into that place. And that was essential to making that work.
But also, it was essential for them even to win in the first place because, look, Wade wasn't that great in that first final series, of the Heatles era.
None of them were. Definitely LeBron definitely wasn't.
And then even like when they won their first championship against Oklahoma City, you saw that Bosh was the difference maker. You saw that he was the guy who can actually he was the stretch player. He was the guy who can go low, he can go high. Mm-hmm. He made the shots, he rebounded, which I think people overlook how important that is. A guy who who's going to get the boards, but he was a reliable option. He had just such tremendous range as a player. He had a gifted shooter. He could bang if he needed to. He did all that stuff. He really was the guy who did the dirty work. He just happened to be a little bit more refined in doing so. And I think that you saw the difference in the team when he was on the floor and when he was off the floor. And so going to your original question about AD's now going through this run the first time. And, him being younger at the time, him being younger than Bosh when he's going through this run, I think allows for the perception of him being the best player. But I think still in a mental sense, and let's be for real, I think Miami Heat are going to be a fascinating series, but I think that it's not as if he's going to go against a caliber. He's not going to go against a team of the similar caliber that those Heat teams did. OKC had that big three and some good depth. The Dallas team, as we talked about earlier, was much better than people realized.
That's one of the deepest championship teams of the last 20 years.
Absolutely. And then San Antonio being San Antonio towards the end of their peak powers and still with Kawhi on that court, Kawhi Leonard on that team. So I think with AD, he's not going against a similar team that has those kind of mega powers, if you will, aligned. And so he can potentially dominate, but we're not going to see really how strong he's going to be in terms of legacy building until the next time the Lakers go to the finals against another team that may be similarly stacked or close to it. Bosh was going against teams that had something, and he was the answer. It was, and I think that's where, again, today I'll say Bosh is the best big man that LeBron has played with. Tomorrow I'll say it's AD based on the sheer talent that he has. And if he actually felt like playing the five, he actually felt like playing the pivot, he could be a great pivot man if he wanted to.
Sure.
Bosh was willing to do that at times. And that's something that AD doesn't want to do. So
and
I think
that's the thing I wonder about Anthony Davis when I look at it. And I'm not one of those people that gets caught up into, you didn't do it yourself, so it doesn't count. Because let's be real, nobody ever won a title by themselves. So I'm not getting it. And what's the smarter play for Anthony Davis to hang around in New Orleans forever, or to get somewhere where he's got a chance to compete? You might as well make your best basketball days count for something. And he's doing that right now. I'm not holding that against him at all.
Right.
Here's the thing, though. When you look around the league and you look at the guys who are driving, at top speed, if you will, we watched this happen with Giannis. Giannis is in, the second half of a back-to-back MVP run that he's at, whether you agree with it or not. It's not like he's any worse than the third best player in the league, no matter how you feel about him and his where he's at right now. But does Anthony Davis take a step back in that hierarchy at all because of the fact that he's at his peak powers, but he already took that acquiesce and moved into a role with another guy? Or is that just, a bygone era of somebody staying out of the mix for that long before they move into a not give up, but join up. Let's put it that way.
I just think that, first of all, on Davis's end, I think he just saw what seemed to be a no-win situation with the Pelicans, especially with let's keep in mind he was there, and there was an ownership change, and that ownership, the Benson family, obviously lost the patriarch, but I think that there's something to be said about a team that ownership that while they may have two teams, their real love is the football team and the Saints, not so much the Pelicans.
Right.
And I think there's some other extra, and I can be wrong. Obviously, I'm not in Louisiana, but I think there's something to be said about understanding that sort of situation and him asking himself, well, based on what the next few off seasons are going to look like, and when can I pull the escape hatch? And where can I go? I think he just saw the best possible situation was with the Lakers team that still had some room to bring him on. This isn't like the Lakers were capped out and had to move a bunch of, they moved a lot of guys, but they didn't move a lot of